You talk to a group of self-defense experts about shotguns, in particular shotguns for home defense, oh boy, are you going to get a range of opinions. Firearms are fascinating things. You can have two experts, equally trained, equally capable, who look at the same tool with exact opposite levels of respect and disgust. And neither of them are really wrong. It's basically that there are two wolves meme, except instead of two wolves, there are two boomer LARPers. One is a conservative or neoliberal who says that all you need is a shotgun and a microphone, because the ultimate home defense setup is really just you jerking off the first round into a microphone loudly through home speakers, so any ne'er-do-wells will hear it and shit their britches and run away.
If you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun. Fire 2 blasts outside the house.
The other FUD is the LARP Raider, who is quick to tell you if you don't have an exact clone of the Mark 18 Mod 0 with an ATEC hybrid, a Steiner D-ball, and SOST ammunition, you're not gonna make it. Now, there is a grain of truth on both sides. On the one hand, shotguns can be an effective tool for home defense, but there are so many myths and misconceptions and misunderstandings around what they can do and what they can do effectively, and I feel like it's really important for us to be talking about what can they do, when are they effective, and would they be effective for you? Because if you're here wondering would they be effective for your home defense situation, all I can say is,
all I know is my gut says maybe.
That said, y'all, before we continue, I do want to give a shout out to my Patreon sponsors, who are the only sponsors of this channel. If you want to support the channel directly, head on over to patreon.com/queerarmorer. Lowest tier is $1 a month. That gets you access to videos earlier than everybody else. It also gets you access to some nice bonus features. This month we have a Q&A going on that's going to be only for Patreon supporters, so definitely swing by if you want to check that out. First things first, and I say this as a shotgun nerd who has taught shotgun technique defensively. If you, right there, sitting watching this right now, you started getting armed within the past 6 months, if you are only now trying to get yourself up to speed as fast as possible, and you're looking at shotguns because, well, they seem cheaper, and you're thinking they might be just as good or an easy way. I need to steal a phrase from Australia. Yeah, nah, mate, nah, yeah, nah. The TLDR of this video, if you wanted to get a kind of summation of what I'm trying to say here. Shotguns, once you have practiced some very annoying and complicated skills, you can get yourself to the point where shotguns take less mental RAM during a fight, where you have to think about your weapon less. If you are just starting out, I guarantee you that shotgun will take more RAM just trying to control it than a AR with a red dot, for example. Shotguns can be an effective tool, but they take work. That said, the firearm that you have access to is better than the one that you don't. There's a lot of states that are doing dumb bans on stuff like ARs. It's also possible maybe you hunt or shoot clay, so you're already familiar and comfortable with shotguns. Maybe you have a partner who is only comfortable with something that has more of a wood hunting vibe. All defensive situations are compromises, so that's a reality you might be dealing with. Not to mention, there's even more states where ARs, even if they're not flat out banned, they may be problematically expensive, or near impossible to access for most groups, or both. Yeah, I would rather have a shotgun than harsh words. Shotguns are one step closer to a controlled explosion than most firearms. They're a little bit ancient in their form factor. They usually don't have rifled barrels, and whatever they send down the pipe is very much dealer's choice. A handful of pellets, a bunch of 9mm bullets, a giant brass slug, a beanbag, the biggest hollow point that you've ever seen, armor-piercing tungsten, fireworks and flammable nonsense. The options are wide and varied, and some of them almost seem to come from the Wile E. Coyote School of Engineering. And it's important to know that what you load will wildly change what your shotgun can, can't, and won't do. So let's open a few and look at what you'd actually be sending so we can talk about what it does and doesn't do. Let's start with practice loads. See, what's actually in the projectile part, these tiny little metal balls that are made out of lead. Now, on the one hand, these are individually easier to aim for sure, because they spread out a bit more. But also, perhaps more importantly, not so much for if you're defending your home with humans. And this is called plastic wadding. Now, what it is doing, that is catching all of the explosive itself. I'm pulling this out. And then this absorbs the force of the explosion, which will be, kind of a randomized thing with randomized directions, and allowing it to control and maintain shape for as long as possible. This is what's known as the flight control wadding. Federal uses them in most of their ammunition now, and you'll notice it's this powdery mix of chemicals. It's like several rocks kind of ground up together. Shotgun powder is notoriously filthy. All guns generate dirt. But this stuff right here is well known as the filthiest powder in town. First of all, you'll notice compared to the last one, this is a 2 3/4 inch shell. These are both 2 3/4 inch shells, technically. The ones that are trying to be full power will go a little bit longer, and this can affect how many rounds you can fit in a magazine. That said, both of them pale in comparison to the full 3-inch magnums. So let's talk about what this is. Now, this is a 3-inch Magnum slug. And it is important to note that with rifled slugs, unlike with traditional bullets, that rifling is really important because there is no rifling in the barrel in most of these guns. Rifled slugs will inevitably run. They are designed to be run in a non-rifled barrel because the rifling on the slug is the only thing stabilizing the slug and giving it spin. This 425 grain lead slug. You'll notice it has this plastic keeper in the bottom of it. Now that would get lost mid-flight, as would this, which is the follower. Because like all of these, they don't want to just put the explosion up against the bullet. The explosion itself is going to kind of shift and randomize. It's, an explosion. They are rather random. So with this system, you have a, kind of like with the other ones, you have the two pieces that separate. Now, on the one hand, these are huge chunksters. They are great for deer, they are great for bear, they are great as if you live out in the woods, they can be a decent defensive option. Shotgun slugs have a tendency to keep going. They're kind of like a bus that way. They're this big, heavy mass that likes to punch through things. The target, walls. This is what's referred to as buckshot. The term shotgun as an adjective outside of firearms, buckshot is kind of similar in concept to birdshot in the sense that it is a metal projectile. However, unlike the birdshot, which was a bunch of very tiny projectiles, double-aught buck is a collection of these 32 caliber balls. It's basically taking a handful of pistol rounds and throwing them down the barrel. And then at the back, you can see the primer, where this is the thing that actually gets struck. You can see at the base, there is an explosion that goes off as the primary explosion that then creates the secondary explosion with the gunpowder. Now there is one last slug that we're going to cut open. But the reason we're cutting it open is partially so I can tell you to never use this. Now this is a light field rubber slug. They're less lethal shotgun slugs, in theory. In practice, they are both not less lethal and not consistently either enough for you to rely on them. First of all, let's touch on the legality real quick. I know moral doesn't mean legal is a staple of this channel, but if you're defending yourself, whether or not you were in the legal right will become a giant question. Understanding the legality of what you are doing and what you're choosing to do is really important, especially when it comes to something like this. So this is a rubber slug, and you can see, and here's the bit that everyone misses. Cops barely have the legal right to use this as a non-lethal ammunition. And the only reason they do is because they're kind of lying when they say it's less lethal. They acknowledge that. They have ranges they're supposed to use it at, and more importantly, they just get to do whatever they want. Even if there's a problem, they will not get in trouble for it. You are not a police officer. If you point a loaded gun, even if it has this rubber slug in it, and pull the trigger, you've pointed a loaded gun at someone and pulled the trigger. It doesn't matter if you say, oh, I was just shooting rubber at them, you shot a gun at someone. That is lethal force. You'll also notice that there is significantly less powder behind one of these. Now the idea, again, is supposed to be a less lethal projectile. However, if you're intending to use it for a lethal engagement, which, if you are defending your home, that abso-fucking-lutely is a lethal engagement, you do not want to run into the situation of someone not being disabled by the shot that you just threw at them, because they're not going to respond kindly. Now that's not to say there's not safe slugs. A frangible slug is a thing. That is 325 grains of fuck your day up. However, that is zinc powder pressed into a projectile that is just designed by being a powder, whatever it hits, it's going to dump its energy to. Breaching slugs are specifically just the powder. It is kind of the slug without any binding, which means on the one hand, they're great at taking out chunks of wall from very close range. However, it is just the raw powder, so when it is launching out, it has far more potential for destroying walls, which is its intention, for about 3 feet. And then it starts very quickly dissipating its energy. So while I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a breaching slug from any distance, I also wouldn't use them exclusively as a home defense option, as there is a more than zero chance that you are going to have to engage someone from beyond 3 feet. If you're interested in frangible ammunition, but you would still want something that has some kind of spread, you're operating at distances that will enable some kind of pattern rather than a very tight grouping, but you want to have the frangibility of a slug. Federal actually has you covered because there is a new form of buckshot that is frangible. The idea is there has been a lot of developments in individual frangible rounds. There's a lot of frangible options for handguns now, which means they use the same technology and create a series of frangible pellets. Speaking of federal flight control, I swear this isn't sponsored by Federal, but they happen to have a lot of interesting ideas when it comes to shotgun stuff and have developed a lot of stuff in that space, including but not limited to the flight control plastic wadding. Anything that has paper or cotton wadding, it's better than nothing, but also there's a limit to how much that can really effectively de-randomize the projectiles that it's pushing. Not to mention, in both of those cases, the wadding can get just torn up by the blast itself, which frequently means the blast is directly affecting the ammunition. Flight control skips past that, So does a lot of similar systems. Hornady has a follower in their critical defense ammunition that does the same thing. Mini shells are also a thing. Mini shells are 1 3/4 inches. They are significantly less powder in exchange for significantly less physical space. The slugs are going to give you most of the potential that a shotgun slug would. Now we're getting into some specific advice for shotguns for home defense. And the first thing that you have to know is you absolutely need to pattern your shotgun. Now, the reason I have suddenly gone off tripod is I need to demonstrate kind of why patterning is so important. So, a home defense situation, with a shotgun, we're going to get into this in a minute, but the important thing is you control the situation. The important thing is you're not thinking of your home as like a battleground. You're thinking of it as a place that you want to defend. And one of the things that you're going to do for that is create a line of defense. There is a line where this is where people do not get past, and you can control that. And importantly, with a shotgun, the distance at which you are engaging will change what the shotgun does. See, let's assume for a moment we're talking about this apartment as a defensive situation. This is the front door, right? That's a closet right there. So this is the entrance point. Now we are going to be engaging from one of two spots. Either right here, now you'll notice that was about 3 steps, about 3 meters, or around this corner here. This distance is about, from that front door where that closet is, 6-7 meters. And because every shotgun is a special snowflake and every loading is unique and different, you are going to need to pattern. We have set up here the 2 engagement distances that we were talking about. We have a little over 2 meters and right at 6 meters when I am standing right here. The first pattern, the bit that went kind of sideways here, that was the plastic wadding. But everything else here, you can see this is a relatively tight group. If you come over here and see over here, that is just larger than a hand, or about the same size as a hand spread-wise. You can almost see it's actually basically double the width. Whether you decide to go pump or semi-auto, you're gonna have to get a lot of specific practice in. And each platform has their own form of practice that you're going to need to use. When you are shooting a pump, for example, you need to get the muscle memory into your head that you pump after every shot. There is a really bad habit that people have to pump and then shoot, pump and then shoot. And then you get yourself into an emergency, you bring the gun up, pull the trigger, and click. Nothing happens because the thing that you raised hadn't been readied yet. To be clear, this is an airsoft gun with currently nothing loaded, so I am not actually shooting. I'm using this as an example for while I'm moving around the apartment. Get used to every time you pick this up, you rack it. You shoot and then pump. Pump immediately and get back online. Shoot, pump, online. Shoot, pump, online. Do not think of the cycle in your head as you pump to ready for the shot. You pump as the thing you do as a reflex after you shoot every time. Otherwise, you're going to end up with the loudest noise in the world. Now, you might think, well, I can just get around that problem by getting a semi-automatic. Remember how I was saying before that shotgun ammo is filthy? All ammo is creating a carbon buildup, but shotgun ammo in particular is notorious for just spraying carbon everywhere. There are older designs that, by their very nature, you can't really contain the gas that well. They end up kind of just spraying shit everywhere. And the problem is, if you pull the trigger and get a click instead of a bang with one of these, what you now need to do is something called error correction, and that is a thing that you're going to need to practice. And specifically, you should practice the form of error correction where you can stay online and fix the problem. Try and practice not only solving it, but solving it without breaking and trying to figure out what the hell is going on with your gun or having to mortar. Practice the motions involved with cycling your gun without breaking your grip. Because the whole point of a semi-auto is you are staying online, so your error correction should follow suit. Pick where you fight. You have a shotgun, which means you have very specific advantages and disadvantages. You also are the one who gets to set up your home, which means cameras, sensors, things that allow you to know when people are entering before they are actually entering are going to be incredibly important. Shotguns are effective when you get to pick the turns. So pick them. That means cameras, that means sensors, that means making sure your home is your castle. That means when people are entering your castle, you know. It also means being intelligent about where you're picking your fight. Now, the example I keep giving is our apartment. This right here is a closet. Now, technically there is somebody in there, but their bed goes all the way back to there, which means engaging from here would be considered safer than engaging from here. Because if you remember our range safety rules, you don't want to have anyone who is a friendly beyond the 90 degrees of where you'll be. You want to make a 180-degree line, right and left, and you don't want to have anyone friendly to you past there. We have certain knowledge that this is where they are entering. We can absolutely engage from here and just barely be okay with the 90-degree rule, because where they are sleeping is equivalent there. That would make this spot unsafe. The number one piece of advice that I find myself giving students whenever I give a shotgun lesson: lean in. Let me show you a demonstration out in the woods. With no leaning, so same ammunition, same everything, except now instead of just leaving ourselves up here to get fully pushed back, let's aggressively lean in and use the entirety of our body weight to push forward on the barrel. This next bit is partially about how you set up the shotgun itself, but honestly it's a non-negotiable bit. A bright-ass light. There's some argument for mounting a handgun light to your handgun specifically for home defense. There's a series of techniques. Offhand light as a helpful way of clearing a room if you want to make sure you're not pointing a gun at a friendly. Unless you have a third glowing mutation of a hand, in which case you don't need the flashlight anyway, just use the glowing from your hand, you're not going to be able to actually hold the shotgun and a flashlight at the same time. And because of that, no, stick a bright-ass light on your shotgun. Just make it bright enough that you can bounce it off the floor and illuminate a room. And importantly, that if you pointed the light at somebody, they wouldn't be able to clearly see where you are, they'd be too disoriented. Well, we have talked about the light, we have talked about the aiming. However, let's bring on the other two major accessories that you should be thinking about when setting up your shotgun. First of all, sling. Get something that is solid and simple. Don't get something you have to futz with too much, and make it something that you can just rapid memory use quickly. More importantly, the shotgun shell holder. And I highly recommend these. These are cheap, they're Velcro. You can easily grab more ammo and throw them on. Shotguns are hungry, hungry beasts. If you are not shooting, you are reloading. Shotguns, think of a shotgun a little bit like a cat. It needs to be fed. It will meow at you if you don't feed it properly. And if you don't feed it for long enough, it will eat you. Don't let it. Now, the push-pull technique is important to know. With a push-pull technique, you are pulling on this side and pushing on the pump slide at the same time in opposite directions to apply a controlling force. Walking out and realizing that I forgot to mention one thing about the min-max shotgun setup. Loctite. Shotguns are absolutely fucking brutal when it comes to accessories. They love knocking stuff loose. They love slowly but surely rattling things around. If it is at all a worry that it could come loose, dip it in Loctite before you assemble it, and don't expect it to ever come apart again. Meanwhile, if you want to know how to actively go through and operatorly clear a house, ZQB sucks. ZQB is painful. If you didn't have family there, this would be the smart option for CQB. Especially alone. CQB sucks. CQB solo is a nightmare. There are people who have dedicated their entire lives to training in CQB, who do this for a living with brutal stakes, who, if they tried to clear a house solo in an exercise, would be happy with a 60% success rate. That's badass, hardcore, training stacked on top of training.
Jesus Christ, that's Jason Bourne.
Type guys who are looking at this situation and just noping the fuck out of it. The best option you can develop if your home is attacked is a hard line. Family is behind you. They have to come through a single point. You don't want to be advancing on the enemy. You want them having to fall on your sword. Try to set it up in such a way that your family is behind you. Anyone that you're caring about is behind the line of fire. They have to come through in a singular position, and preferable, a position you can engage with from cover. This line is where you issue instructions to invaders. The first thing they should hear is clear instructions to leave. Don't swear. Calmly, loudly, declaratively say they have to leave, and remind them of consequences. Do not swear, but inform them that you are armed and the police are on their way. At that point, they are advancing at their own risk. You need to practice how you are presenting around cover, and it helps a lot to do this with other people. It's the kind of thing that you won't necessarily see on your own, unless you can maybe do it with a camera setup like this, but realistically, if you can do it with a friend and some airsoft, one, you can have a lot more fun, and two, you can kind of more rapidly adjust for each other far more usefully. However, first of all, you're going to need to get used to shooting what's called off-axis. So, normally when I shoot like this, which means I am planting, I am putting a foot behind me, drilled into the ground as a way of powering the shot. I am leaning in with my entire body weight as much as possible aggressively. However, you'll notice while I'm shooting like this, if the camera's in the position that a foe would be, so you can see all of me. This is not a great use of cover. Now, if I go here, this is the closest I can get around this corner. However, if I try and angle out, put a foot down and angle around here, now this might be better. I might have most of my body blocked. I'm still exposing my leg. So, first of all, you should make sure you are practicing around both your positioning in cover and when you are shooting. You should practice shooting from odd positions and getting used to how to shoot from an odder angle. However, more importantly, what I'm going to do here is brace this arm on here so that when I move my leg back, I still have an additional point of contact while I'm shooting. And that also means that because I am supported here and leaning out, the first thing that an intruder is seeing is not my leg, it's a loaded shotgun. And that's far superior. That said, you'll notice if I was going to shoot that same way here, there's basically no way for me to hold this position and not just immediately expose all of me. In order for me to be shooting from this position, I have to switch hands. This is the only effective way to be shooting around this corner, which also really means I need to practice shooting in multiple positions. And I also really need to practice kind of what would be wrong-handed for me normally. Choking up is not just for baseball. Let's say I wanted to clear around this corner. But realistically, as soon as I start getting over to here, I don't have the ability to properly hold the shotgun. And then worse, once I'm going around over there, I know there's a larger space over there I need to be thinking about. So what you can do is go sideways and back and lay this on top of your shoulder. Then you use that push-pull technique we were talking about and pressure from the back of your arm as a way of controlling it around a short corner. Once you do that choking up solution, you no longer have the shotgun properly secured by your shoulder. So if you're going to do this, you have to really tightly lock down. So you have to have it pinched in, and then right as you are pulling the trigger, like a second before, push, then pull the trigger. Essentially, it is turning all of your arms into a control surface. Normally, if I pulled the trigger here, if I didn't have a firm grip, this would go flying. There's a reason why there's tons of videos of people dropping their shotguns. In order to prevent that, we have to have firm control. As for what specific shotgun you should get, I'm not telling you. I'm sorry, I refuse.
How dare you!
Seriously, everybody's body is wildly different, and shotguns are going to be very, very situational. I will say, if you have some experience with firearms generally, and you're looking to get a shotgun setup that is both cheap and kind of what I would consider definitively competent, this is what I would recommend.
This is a Mossberg 88. It is the 20-inch model, although they make an 18.5-inch that works very similarly. It is basically a shotgun made cheap.
Really quickly touching on what's called a Raptor grip. These are things like the Shockwave grip. Here's a picture of somebody who uses a normal shotgun. And here's the same video, only the person uses a Raptor grip. Can you tell the difference? Friends do not let friends use a Shockwave for defense, because that's just going to punch you in the face every time you try and control it. I think if I had to sum up shotguns for defense, it would be every situation is wildly different, and you're never going to know if they would work until you work out yours. That's going to be it from me. Thank you all for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Head over to Patreon if you want to support me directly. That's the best way to do that. You'll get more content like this, you'll get it sooner than everybody else, and you'll help make sure that this channel can continue to, exist and be a thing. So that is going to be it from me. Stay dangerous, y'all. Keep each other safe. And remember, moral doesn't mean legal. Stonewall was a fucking riot. Peace.